In ancient Israel, in the quiet town of Bethlehem, lived a young shepherd boy named David. He was the youngest son of Jesse, a respected elder in their tribe. Jesse was known for his deep faith in God and had raised his children to be strong, honorable men. David's mother, Nitsavet, was a kind woman who was proud of her son's dedication and bravery, even though his tasks mostly involved tending sheep in the fields. David had 7 older brothers, each taller and more experienced in the ways of war. They served in the army of King Saul, Israel's first king, who was chosen to lead his people in a time of great unrest. David, however, was left behind, watching over his father's flock in the hills of Bethlehem. Yet David was not just a shepherd. He was a young man with an unbreakable spirit and an unwavering faith in God. In the stillness of the fields, he would sing praises to God and practice his skills with a sling, protecting his flock from wild animals. One day, as war raged between the Israelites and their ancient enemies, the Philistines, the two armies camped on opposite hills with a wide valley between them. In this valley, a fearsome champion from Gath named Goliath stepped forward. Goliath was a giant, nearly 10 feet tall, and his armor alone weighed as much as a grown man. His bronze helmet and massive spear reflected the sunlight, and he carried a sword as big as a beam. Every day for 40 days, Goliath would come forward and shout to the Israelites, "Choose a man to fight me. If he kills me, we will serve you. But if I kill him, you will serve us." His voice thundered through the valley, striking fear into every Israelite's heart, including King Saul's. Meanwhile, Jesse, concerned for his older sons on the battlefield, called David to his side. "Take this roasted grain, these 10 loaves of bread, and 10 cheeses to your brothers and their commander. Bring back news of how they are faring." Jesse hoped that by sending David to the battlefield, he would also help David see his brother's bravery. David left at dawn and arrived at the battlefield just as the army was preparing for another day's standoff. While he spoke with his brothers, Goliath once again stepped forward, taunting the Israelites and defying God's people. David's face turned red with anger. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" he asked. David's oldest brother, Eliab, overheard him and scolded him, "Why have you come down here? I know your pride and the wickedness of your heart. You just want to watch the battle." However, David did not let his brother's words discourage him. He continued to ask about Goliath until word reached King Saul, who summoned David. In the king's tent, Saul looked at the young shepherd with disbelief. David was small and youthful, while Goliath was a seasoned warrior. But David spoke with conviction, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul shook his head, doubting David's strength. But David replied, "I have been a shepherd, defending my flock from lions and bears. When a lion came to snatch a lamb, I struck it down. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." Reluctantly, Saul agreed and offered his own armor to David. But the armor was too heavy, and David set it aside, trusting only in what he knew. He took his shepherd's staff, his sling, and carefully chose 5 smooth stones from a nearby brook. With nothing more than these simple tools, he walked toward Goliath, his heart full of faith. As David approached, Goliath sneered, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" He cursed David and his God, laughing at the sight of such a young, unarmed boy facing him. Nevertheless, David did not flinch. "You come against me with sword and spear," he shouted, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." With a swift, practiced motion, David took a stone, placed it in his sling, and hurled it with deadly accuracy. The stone struck Goliath on the forehead, sinking deep, and the giant fell forward to the ground with a crash. The Philistines, watching their champion defeated, were overcome with fear and fled. The Israelites chased after them, securing a great victory. David's bravery and unyielding faith in God would soon make him a hero in all of Israel. From that day on, David's life would be changed as the people saw him as more than just a shepherd. He was a chosen warrior, destined for greatness. After David's stunning victory over Goliath, his life changed dramatically. His bravery and faith earned him favor with King Saul and the admiration of the people of Israel. The young shepherd became a national hero, and King Saul took him into his service, where David quickly rose to prominence as a warrior. However, as David grew in popularity, Saul became jealous and feared that David would replace him as king and sought to kill him. King Saul tried to kill David multiple times. One of the first attempts occurred when Saul threw a spear at David. David often played the harp to soothe Saul, who was troubled by an evil spirit sent from the Lord due to his disobedience. During one such moment, Saul's jealousy flared up as he dwelled on the praises the people had sung. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. In a fit of rage, Saul picked up his spear and threw it at David. As he did, he said to himself, "I will pin David to the wall." David, however, was quick and managed to evade the attack twice. This act of violence revealed Saul's deep fear and paranoia that David, chosen by God, would one day replace him as king. Despite this shocking betrayal, David remained loyal to Saul and continued to serve in his court, even as Saul's attempts to harm him escalated. Saul's jealousy deepened as David continued to win battles and gain the affection of the people. In a bid to get rid of David again, Saul sent David into dangerous military campaigns, hoping that David would be killed in battle. Saul also used his daughter, Michal, to trap David by offering her in marriage. Saul asked for the dowry of 100 Philistine foreskins as the price for Michal's hand in marriage. His intention was for David to be killed in the process of collecting them. He was certain that the dangerous task would end in David's death. However, David successfully completed the task, bringing back 200 foreskins. Saul was compelled to give Michal to David as his wife, further solidifying David's position within the royal family. With David's marriage to Michal, Saul's jealousy and fear of David only grew. He realized that David's growing popularity and success were signs of divine favor, leading to increased hostility. Later, David fled from Saul's palace following several attempts on his life. Saul, determined to kill him, sent soldiers to kill David at his home several times, but David narrowly escaped the attacks. When these efforts failed, Saul personally pursued David openly. Saul personally hunted him down, forcing David to flee and live as a fugitive, hiding in caves and wilderness for years. David relied on God for protection during these hard times. During these years, David gathered a loyal group of followers, and his faith in God remained unshaken. Despite being pursued by the king, David never retaliated or sought vengeance. On more than one occasion, David had the opportunity to kill Saul but chose mercy, demonstrating his respect for God's anointed king. For example, one day David and his men were hiding in a cave in the wilderness of En-Gedi when Saul, unaware of their presence, entered the same cave to relieve himself. David's men saw this as a clear sign that God had delivered Saul into David's hands, urging him to strike down the king. However, David quietly crept up and cut off a corner of Saul's robe instead, sparing Saul's life. When Saul left the cave, David called out to him, showing the piece of the robe as proof that he could have killed him but chose not to. He said, "This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed. Look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe but did not kill you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me. And may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you." Saul was deeply moved by David's words and wept. He acknowledged David's righteousness, admitting that David had repaid him with kindness despite Saul's attempts to harm him. Saul even blessed David, saying, "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly." This act of mercy led Saul to recognize David's righteousness. Saul admitted that David would one day become king and asked David to swear not to harm his descendants or erase his family name when he takes over the throne. David agreed and made an oath. After this encounter, Saul returned home, but David and his men did not follow him. Instead, David remained in the wilderness, aware that Saul's jealousy and hostility might not be permanently resolved. However, Saul's repentance was temporary as he continued to pursue David later. King Saul continued to be disobedient to God and relied on the Witch of Endor for guidance, a medium he consulted in desperation when he could no longer hear from God through prophets or dreams. This act of seeking guidance through forbidden means showed his disobedience to God's laws and further distanced him from divine favor. King Saul's death was ultimately caused by his disobedience to God. During the battle against the Philistines at Mount Gilboa, Saul was critically wounded. Fearing capture, he fell on his own sword to avoid being taken by the enemy. After Saul's death in battle, David's path to kingship became clear. He was anointed king over Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. David ruled from the city of Hebron, a city in the hills south of Jerusalem. However, despite David being anointed king of Judah, Saul's son Ishbosheth claimed the throne over the remaining tribes, leading to a divided kingdom among the tribes. After years of civil war, David's forces triumphed. David was finally anointed king over all of Israel. David then united the tribes, solidified his power, and established Jerusalem as the political and spiritual capital of the nation. He brought the Ark of the Covenant to the city, symbolizing God's presence among the people. Under David's leadership, Israel experienced military victories, prosperity, and a strengthened national identity. Michal, King Saul's daughter and David's first wife, did not bear any children for David. David later had children with several wives and concubines who bore him children. Mothers of his children include Ahinoam of Jezreel, a wealthy woman from Jezreel whom David had met during his time as a fugitive when he was fleeing from King Saul. She became one of David's wives after he established his own following. She bore him his first son Amnon. David met Abigail when he was fleeing from King Saul and living in the wilderness. Abigail was the wife of Nabal, a wealthy but foolish man. When Nabal insulted David, Abigail quickly intervened, bringing provisions to David and preventing conflict. Impressed by her wisdom and actions, David later married her after Nabal's sudden death. She bore David a son, Chilib, also called Daniel. David met Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, when he sought alliances with neighboring kingdoms. Maacah became his wife, and together they had children, including Absalom and Tamar. David also married a woman named Haggith, and they had a son together named Adonijah. David married a woman named Abital, and they had a son together named Shephatiah. Eglah, another of David's wives, had a son for him named Ithream. One evening, as the cool breeze swept across the city, David walked to the roof of his palace. From his vantage point, he noticed a woman bathing. Her beauty was breathtaking. That woman was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, one of David's loyal soldiers who was away fighting in the king's battles. King David, a man after God's heart, fell into temptation when he saw Bathsheba. Consumed by desire, despite her being married to Uriah, he summoned Bathsheba to his palace, and despite knowing it was wrong, he allowed temptation to consume him. They committed adultery, and when she became pregnant, he schemed to cover it up. He summoned Uriah from battle, hoping he would sleep with Bathsheba, but Uriah's loyalty to his comrades kept him from enjoying the comforts of home. Desperate, David orchestrated his death by sending him back to the front lines with a letter to his army commander, Joab, with instructions that ultimately led to Uriah's death. The letter was sealed and entrusted to Uriah himself to carry back to Joab, not knowing its contents. The letter contained these instructions: put Uriah in the front line where the fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die. God sent the prophet Nathan to confront David with a parable of a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. Nathan told the story: there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for his guest. Outraged, David declared the rich man deserved to die, only for Nathan to declare, "You are that man." Stricken with guilt, David confessed his sin and repented deeply, crying out for mercy. Though forgiven, David faced severe consequences. His newborn son, born of his sin with Bathsheba, became gravely ill and died despite David's prayers and fasting. Yet, God prevailed, and later Bathsheba gave birth to Solomon, a child blessed by God, who would grow to continue the divine plan and become Israel's wisest king. Strife plagued his family, including his son Absalom's rebellion. Among his many children, one stood out: the handsome and charismatic Absalom. His beauty was legendary, his hair thick and flowing, his eyes sharp, and his presence magnetic. He was a prince, loved by the people, admired by many. Yet, despite the love his father had for him, Absalom harbored deep resentment. His heart was full of pride, and he believed that he could be a better king than his father could. Absalom's heart yearned for the throne, and in his mind, David's rule was slowly fading. Absalom, King David's strikingly handsome and ambitious son, plotted to overthrow his father and claim the throne of Israel. He cleverly won the hearts of the people by standing at the city gates, listening to their complaints and promising a better rule. Declaring himself king, Absalom's rebellion forced David to flee Jerusalem, his heart heavy with grief. A fierce battle erupted between David's loyalists and Absalom's army. During the fight, Absalom's flowing hair became entangled in a tree, leaving him vulnerable. Despite David's plea to spare him, Absalom was killed. David wept bitterly, crying, "O Absalom, my son!" David repented and sought God's forgiveness. Through his failures and triumphs, David remained a man after God's own heart. As he grew older, his health declined, and his son Adonijah attempted to seize the throne. David intervened, ensuring that his son Solomon would succeed him. David gave Solomon advice, charged him with building the temple, and passed away after ruling for 40 years. He was buried in the city of David, remembered for his deep faith, devotion, and the establishment of a kingdom that would later lead to the lineage of Jesus Christ. The story of David teaches that faith in God can overcome immense challenges, as demonstrated by his defeat of Goliath. It highlights the importance of humility, trust, and courage in the face of adversity. Despite his flaws, David's repentance and devotion to God show that true leadership stems from a heart aligned with God's will. His life reminds us that God's plans prevail even through trials, and that obedience, humility, and faith lead to lasting success. In contrast, King Saul's jealousy and insecurity serve as a warning that unchecked envy can result in destructive decisions, loss of purpose, and the downfall of one's destiny.
Do not miss out on the powerful lessons and inspiring stories we have in store, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Follow us for more captivating Bible adventures that will strengthen your faith and uplift your heart. Hit that subscribe button and join the Bible Storytime family today.